three amazing mystery suspense thriller authors, Laura Jarratt, Brooke, Beyfuss, and Rebecca McKenna. For those of you that are coming in, or if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube Live, feel free to drop in the chat where you're from. Say hi to us. Let us know what you're up to this Friday night. Got big plans for the weekend. We would love to hear from you. Welcome to you all today. Thank you for joining us. We got Diane is joining us from Oregon. Hello, Diane. This is really a worldwide event because Laura is in the UK, Brooke's on the East Coast, Rebecca and I are in the Midwest. So
now we're in Oregon.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's what I love about virtual events. You have the opportunity to tune in wherever you're at. We got Elizabeth from Pittsburgh. Hi, Elizabeth. Give people another minute or so to come in and we'll do a quick intro and jump right into things. We're really happy that everybody's joining us. New Jersey, New Hampshire, awesome. Chelsea and Lori, nice to meet you. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a lot to chat about tonight. We've got three authors to talk to with some amazing books that are coming out. They also have backlist titles we can dive into as well while we wait for the new books to come out. My name is Terry, and I'm with Swamp Fox Bookstore, which is located in Marion, Iowa. And we opened in the summer of 2020 with myself and my two book loving friends, Amanda and Ursula. We're a general bookstore featuring books for all ages in just 360 square feet of space. So we like to think of it as a TARDIS, if anybody is a Doctor Who fan. You can find us online at swampfoxbookstore.com and on Facebook and Instagram. Our handle on both is Swamp Fox Bookstore. So we are excited to be hosting this event with three Sourcebooks authors, and we couldn't be more pleased and excited that they are with us online tonight from their various locations. So Laura Jarratt is a critically acclaimed Carnegie Medal and Waterstone Children's Book Prize nominated author. She lives in rural Cheshire with her husband and her two children, and we were just talking about their new horse they'll be working with this weekend. And her book, Without Saying Goodbye, released this week. Congratulations, Laura. It is a tense, suspenseful novel about motherhood and survival, and it's perfect for book clubs. Brooke Beyfuss is a freelance writer who lives in Woodbridge Township, New Jersey. She graduated from Rutgers University with degrees in psychology and comparative literature and has written extensively on some wonderfully wild topics. Can't wait to hear about that. Her debut novel, After We Were Stolen, was featured in Bustle magazine, presented at the 2022 Kansas Book Festival, and selected as a fall 2022 Hoopla Book Club pick. Her sophomore novel, Before You Found Me, will be on shelves on my birthday, August 1st, 2023. Rebecca McKenna was born and raised in Iowa, and her fiction has been anthologized in the Best American Mystery Stories 2019 and honored as a distinguished story in the Best American Short Stories 2019, among other publications. An assistant professor of English at the University of Indianapolis, where she's just wrapping up finals this week. She earned her MFA from Purdue University. Her upcoming novel, Don't Forget the Girl, will be available on June 20th, 2023, and is loosely based on Ted Bundy's killing spree and is set in Iowa and the University of Iowa, so I hear. So welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us a little bit, if you want to take a turn, a little bit more about your upcoming book. What's it about? And since we might have some readers who may not be familiar with your books, what books or authors share shelf space with books like yours?
Who wants to go first?
Laura, you want to go first?
Yeah, that's fine. So the sound cut out for me a little bit over here. So I've got it actually in my hands here at the moment. Without Saying Goodbye, is a book about two women who meet each other in some quite unusual circumstances. Both of them are running away from something, and Keris is going through menopause, which was interesting to write about. And she's at that point in life where her kids have left, they've gone to university. She feels kind of without purpose, and she comes across a really young mother, Lily, with a really small child in tow, who is running away from something in her life as well. And when those two women come together, they actually find something in each other that they really tune into. and that they really need in each other, and they become friends. But at some point, the past is going to catch up with them. And the way in which that kind of plays out, the people they meet along the way, was a great pleasure to write about. But fundamentally, this is about the relationships between women, between mothers and their children.
Brooke, do you want to go?
Where will I be on the shelf? This is really difficult for me because I actually, in the UK, we don't kind of market my stuff in that way. It goes in with fiction, with everything else, so it doesn't actually get pigeonholed and niched with any particular authors actually out there on the bookshelf. So I genuinely don't know over there in the US where this kind of fits into your market and how it appears on your bookshelf. So Terry, I'm gonna have to take advice from you on that one. Where do you put it? Who do you put it with?
Well, our store is only 360 square feet, so it would be in our general fiction area. But I know that I'm talking to the publicist that these are all like suspense thrillers, so be on the shelf with our local authors would be Heather Gudenkoff, for anybody that is familiar with her, Mandy Mejia. So if you like those types of novels, that will definitely fit in there.
Yeah. I think the closest thing people describe it is domestic thriller. That's the closest to a genre that I do. So.
Awesome. Brooke, you want to jump in?
Sure. So my upcoming novel, I have it also, it's called Before You Found Me. And it is the story of a young woman. She's 22, and she is escaping from a really volatile engagement. And her fiance takes an attempt on her life, which does not succeed, fortunately, but it leaves her permanently disfigured. So the book opens with her kind of escaping that relationship, and she decides to go stay with a friend up in New England to kind of regroup and get her head together. And while she's there, she meets a little boy who lives next door. And odd about him is that he never comes out of the house. She only sees him through the window. She only talks to him through the basement window. And she ultimately finds out that his father is abusing him in very similar ways that her fiance used to abuse her. She has plans to move back to her Oklahoma home where she was raised. And she decides that when she goes, she's just going to take him with her. So she abducts him. And the story kind of follows their lives. It follows them for 9 years. And it talks about how she raises him and how she brings him up. And you kind of get lulled into a bit of a false sense of security because they're together for quite a while. And then you find out that his father is not far behind and knows exactly what happened. So they're kind of running from both the specter of his father and his abuse, but also the physical actual version of him. And it is, again, it's also a domestic thriller. It's a found family story. And yeah, that's the crux of it. There's a lot of mother figures in it. And we'll talk about those a little bit later on. But if I had to, comparison-wise, I also had a hard time with this. I hate doing comp titles. They're very rough for me. When I first wrote this book, I had a comparison to Room. And I've also had people talk about Mad Honey. And more my first book than this one got a heavy comparison to Meadowlark by Melanie Abrams.
I'm going to reach back here.
All right. So my book is called Don't Forget the Girl, and it follows 3 college friends, one of whom goes missing and is suspected to have been a victim of a serial killer. And 12 years later, when the killer is soon to be executed, her body is found. There's sort of a true crime media circus going on, and her 2 best friends are kind of pulled back together, and they have to face the past, face some secrets they've kept, and kind of reckon with things that went on when they were in college. I also, it is so hard and so interesting to try to compare your books or think about where they would sit with other books. I think that in general, people who enjoy character-driven or female-focused mystery or thrillers would enjoy Don't Forget the Girl. I think some of the comp titles we had discussed before were Liz Moore's Long Bright River, and also I would love to have it compared to Celeste Ng's Everything I Never Told You.
So I know you all lead busy lives. We were chatting about that before we jumped on live. So what is the day of your life like as an author? How do you work it into everything else that you do?
Do you want me to start on this? So I have got a super busy job. I work in a structure that I don't think you have in the US. So I'm CEO of a group of schools called a multi-academy trust, which means I basically run 12 schools in a kind of umbrella arrangement. So that's my day job. And I've been in education my full adult career. So I fit it in around that. I've got, a daughter who is at an age where she takes up a lot of my time. So I am that person who, if they're going to write, it's 5 o'clock in the morning for an hour, or it's, particularly when she was a little bit younger and she'd go to bed and it'd be, yeah, I've got an hour before, I'm shattered and I crash out. But what I worked out was that actually you can get, if in a short stint, you can get 1,000 words done in an hour. And if you do that day after day, you in 3 months you've got a book, or a first draft of a book to work on. Now, I don't always stick to that now because the job's just got busier and busier, and she's got older and she stays up longer. But essentially, yeah, it gets sandwiched in, at that point. And it does take me longer now to produce a book than it probably used to a few years ago. But I reckon that probably comes good as she starts to get bored and want less time with a mum, and like more time with friends as she gets that bit older. I'll get some of the time back then. But yeah, I'm very much first thing in the morning or last thing at night, and not a lot of time in the middle.
So I have a very boring day job. I used to work full-time as a copywriter. That is the copywriter I wrote for an adult entertainment company. We talked a little bit about that, and everybody's very interested in hearing about that. But I left that position because it was pretty much a 24-hour on-call kind of a situation. So took a lot of my time, and I really just wanted to write. So I actually quit fully while I was writing Before You Found Me, and I was out of work for 6 months, and then I just got a very basic, very easy job that I could go to every day. I get done by 3:30, and then I have more time to write. I try to do a lot of writer-centric things. So I am the founder of a writers group in my township with the Cultural Arts Committee, and we meet every other week. And I also belong to a weekly Saturday morning writing group that I'm the co-host of. So we do that, and I try to really pack my schedule with a lot of like book clubs and talks like this. I love doing things like this, so I go to libraries and talk. So that's really been kind of my goal to just do as many bookish things as I can. While I have a very understanding family who kind of lets me have a boring, silly job that I don't have to worry too much about, so that I can do other things. And yeah, I've done book festivals, and that's what I really like to kind of shoot for.
So I'm an English professor at a teaching-focused institution, which means that I have a higher teaching load than if someone is at more of a research-focused institution. So I'm trying to fit writing during the semester around teaching. Sometimes I'm successful at that, sometimes not as much. And so during the semesters, I'm not always writing every day. The summer is really the time where I just have that nice long stretch of time that I can really get into a book, or if I'm revising, can just really stay in that world. But otherwise in the semesters, probably writing looks a little bit more like a few hours here and there when I can get it. I try to schedule my classes so that I'm teaching more in the afternoons and have the morning free for writing. But if I check my email, that gets derailed very quickly. So I'm trying to be better about that.
The dreaded email. So I'm going to combine a question that I have on here with one that came in via the chat because it kind of fits together. So please tell us just a little bit about your writing process. Somebody asked in the chat or in the questions, how do you name your characters?
So I don't. The writing process questions. It's always a really funny one for me because I'm a complete pantser, and yeah. So I don't plot in advance, and I'm really interested to find out what the rest of you do. I start off with just the loosest idea, and then I just start writing, and it's so stressful doing it like that. It really is. If I could actually be that person. I listened to J.K. Rowling at one point talk about when she was first writing Harry Potter, how she planned the entire thing in advance and knew everything that was going to happen, and I just can't do that. I just have to sit and it just kind of comes out on the page. And quite often in the early stages I write with pen and paper still, and it just comes out better when I do that. I have no idea how that works. It's just like a process of discovery as I'm kind of going through it, but I do always know the end point. I know the start, maybe a scene at the start in my head, the end point, and some of the characters appear just as the pen's moving over the paper. And it is a voyage of discovery, and it's the only way I can do it. If I try to plan it, I just find it gets turgid and boring. The drafting process is where I start sharpening things up and moving scenes around and making things fit. But I have to get, kind of at least the first third of the book whacked out before I start doing anything like that. And how to name the characters, it really varies in every single book. Some arrive with their name as you kind of create them, and
my cat. I'm sorry.
I sit there with a baby names book, and I remember when I first met my husband, and he came round, and there were bookshelves everywhere, and he doesn't read, and there was a baby names book on the bookshelf, and he picked it up and looked at me like I was some crazy, and was like, "Why have you got that?" And I was just like, "Writer." He was like, "Oh yeah, okay." We did get married, so I obviously thought I wasn't complete crazy. Sometimes I just sit there with a baby names book, flicking through, kind of going, who does this person feel like? Quite a lot of the time, though, they just pop in my head, and it is that random.
So Laura,
the only other thing I do is, like that thing where you have to make sure you've not used the same initials on too many character names. That spoils things so often. I've had to go back and change it.
So is your process the same for children's books? You start pen and paper, just writing out everything? Yeah.
It's mad. My agent said, you waste so much time doing that. I'm like, I know, but it's the only way it works. And I just enjoy it better that way. And I literally have had characters that I've never known have existed until I actually start writing. They're the loosest idea. I think that my first book, which was about a girl my first children's book, which was about a girl who was disfigured in a car accident. The main male character in there, I just didn't know him until I actually started writing, and it was in first person, and he just evolved on the page, and that was just the most fantastic experience of just writing him like that. And he was such a distinctive character as well. So I don't know where they come from. They're not based on anybody either. It's just a process of creation. It's lovely. Yeah, that's my favourite bit of the book. It's the characters.
Awesome.
So I'm very similar. I'm also a pantser. I can't plot anything. I usually know my beginning and my end, and I kind of figure out and meander how to get there in the process. Just an example of how much of a meanderer I am. Before You Found Me, the first draft was 264,000 words. So that was a big edit. I have the same kind of feeling. My characters come to me very organically. A lot of times they do come with their names. Most of the time I'd say they come with their names, but I am also a big fan of baby name books and baby name websites. And I try to stay away from name generators because they've done me dirty in the past. But it's a very kind of, it's kind of a raw process. I don't really get much polish until I'm going through the last few edits. Usually it's just me kind of like spewing out on the page. And I love when I get characters that I didn't expect. They're usually my favorite characters. Anybody that showed up that wasn't intended to is usually, I know they're going to be great. So I thank them very much. I'm like, thank you for coming in here at this point because I needed you. As far as plotting goes, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's a very daunting process for me to just sit down and say, I'm going to write out the whole book in a summary. And it's just so difficult to do. So, but I have a quick funny story about being a pantser. I got interviewed by our local news over the phone, and the guy who was interviewing me asked me how my writing process was. And I told him, I said, I'm a pantser. And I explained what that meant. And when the article came out, he called me a panther. So in this whole article, he referred to Brooke refers to herself as a panther. And I'm like, no, I really don't. So I didn't share that one with anybody.
Was there any context in the article? Like, it just said she refers to herself as a panther, and then
he did part of the quote. Like, I did a whole quote that would have explained the whole thing, but he just picked that little bit out. And, Brooke, as far as, writing goes, Brooke considers herself a panther. And I'm like, oh, dear God, no. Yeah, it was embarrassing. I was like, oh, boy, I got interviewed. And I'm like, I'm not showing this to anybody.
Oh, that's amazing. No, I mean, we're all, I think, of a kind here. I wish so deeply that I could outline, but the first draft of this book, I mean, it was just so different. It's like I do outline, but I outline after I've written a draft. And then it's like, okay, now I'm looking at the different plot points and moving things around. I think it's why I enjoy revision so much. I have to have this like mass to work with. Similar to Brooke, like Don't Forget the Girl was originally a linked short story collection. My friend Kelsey, I saw her in the chat. Shout out Kelsey, who read the different iterations of this book. But yeah, it's like I had to sort of ramble, get to know every character, and then I could go back and take it and shape it into what it became. In terms of character names, the baby name websites are where it is at. I also really like, I'll go to Google and just ask, a common boy's name, someone who was born in this part of the country in this year, and just kind of see like a list, and that can really help. But I've definitely had it before, like Laura said, where I've got too many characters with, all of their names are starting with B's or something, and then you have to go back. And that can be weirdly hard because you get sort of attached to that initial name that then no longer can work. So
I actually had to change the name of the main character in the fourth children's one that I did, because unfortunately at the time, and this kind of ties into what you were just saying, Rebecca, there was a really nasty case where a girl was abducted and was later found dead, and that's what the kind of premise of my book was about. And they'd got the same name, and we just kind of, like, me and my agent said, we can't put it out like this. It's too raw. There'd been too much news about it. It was going to be really uncomfortable. So it was really hard to change the name of a character when you've lived with that for an entire book, to go back and flip it. So yeah, I get that. It's difficult.
Have you ever named anyone in your books after a family member or a friend? Elizabeth was wondering.
No, I avoid it. I avoid trying to name connected with absolutely anybody at all, and that's probably kind of like complete paranoia from working in education, where you try and avoid associating it with any child that you've ever worked with, which can make things quite difficult. So no, I try and keep mine as bland as possible. There was one where the book is dedicated to a friend of mine. Mainly because the character has the same name, but it wasn't named after her. And actually that character, who was going into witness protection, did sit and thumb through a baby name book at the start to try to come up with her fake name to go into witness protection scheme. And that was kind of inspired on me actually having to do that. And the name she came up with was a friend's, but yeah, they weren't connected at all at the start.
So where do you get your ideas from? Where does the inspiration for your books come from? What inspired your latest novel that you've written?
With mine, this is the first time I've done this. It came from 2 news articles that were simultaneously in the British press. They weren't both about women. One was about a woman who'd gone missing with her child, and there were some circumstances around that have got a few similarities, but not an enormous amount. It was just that initial idea, and she was missing a long time with this child. And I was thinking, okay, how on earth is she hiding out? What's going on? Is somebody helping her? And the other was a really sad story about a guy who did kind of start off the way that Kerry starts off. She goes off into the Welsh Hills, and her intention is to end her life. Because she's got to that point where she just can't, she's in such a depression that she just can't see herself coming out of it. And she abandons the car and goes off. And that was based on his story. Sadly, it didn't end up for him as well as it did for her. But it was just that idea of those 2 people colliding. And then that was it, 2 storylines that came together, and the rest of it came out of that. It's the first time I've ever done it, kind of looking at something that has kind of come from a news article. The rest have been very, very different starts.
Yeah, I had Before You Found Me was a long haul. A lot of people don't realize this, but it was actually the first book I ever wrote. After We Were Stolen was my debut, but it was not the first book I ever wrote. Before You Found Me was, and I wrote it 11 years ago. So it went through an extensive edit during the rewrite, but I did write it 11 years ago, and I got the idea when I was 14. And I have notes and notebooks from when I was 14 that jotting down little like character names or characteristics of them or just little story ideas. But my biggest vision for the book, the only thing I kept seeing it again and again and again, was two people running from a tornado. And I just kept seeing them, these two people running from a tornado. And I'm going, why are they in front of a tornado in the first place? What's their relation? And I knew it was a young woman and a little boy. And I said, what are they doing there? Why are they there? What's going on that they're even together and, in the path of this storm? And it just kind of grew inside me. And when I did start writing in earnest, I would write stories about myself. I would write true essays and, more memoir type stories, because fiction felt a little too personal to me. It felt very personal. I said, I don't want to put fiction down because it felt like letting people into my brain. And I said, that doesn't make any sense because I'm letting them into my literal brain by stories about me. But fiction felt very personal. So it was very difficult for me to kind of take the leap. I was 32 when I started writing the book. So I really was taking my time with it. But once I started, I wrote those 264,000 words in 9 months. It just absolutely poured out of me. So that was the inspiration for this one. It was just, I had an idea when I was a teenager and it took me forever to get it on paper. But my debut had a funny story because it was based off a writing prompt for a contest that I lost. And I got really mad that I lost the contest. So I said, I'm going to make this 75-word prompt into a whole book. And I did.
So cool.
Yeah.
So for mine, for Don't Forget the Girl, it was a couple of things. So one, I had written a short story for my MFA thesis, and the focus really wasn't the girl who had been killed, or even really her friends who were grieving her. That was kind of a side plot to this story. But I had written that, and then for another writing project I was doing, I was researching one of Ted Bundy's victims, and I could not find anything about her other than her age, where she was from, her occupation. And I even requested microfilm from different newspapers from the time, and I just still didn't find anything. And I remember leaving the library after going through the microfilm being so angry that I could pick up any number of true crime books and find out every detail about Ted Bundy, but I couldn't, this person that he had ended her life so young, there's nothing about her. It was like she didn't matter other than just a name in a list of names. And so that kind of changed the way that I consumed true crime, and it kind of changed the shape of what I was writing and pushed it more to focus on one victim, her friends, rather than sort of this killer.
So follow-up, Amanda asks, have you ever used any real life experiences in your books?
I was just thinking about this because I saw it come in. And small thing, I guess, with this one, kind of in an obscure way. I used to do a lot of work with traumatized children, and some of what you see in Lily's actions and her child's actions are kind of based on my experience of working with children who've experienced trauma, and some of the reactions that you kind of see with that, and that what you will see in Lily is her basically push people away when they get too close, and yeah, I mean that was quite a significant part. The other thing was, when I was writing this book, I was going through menopause, and I didn't experience it in the way that Kerris did, but what it did do was make it something where I had a lot more empathy with her position, and my friend at the time, we've got two kids the same age, but she's got an elder one, and hers was just about to leave home for uni, and it was just like, I was watching her going through that whole letting go part. So probably this one more than any other, there are bits in there of things that do kind of come from personal experience. I just found Kerris's position quite interesting, just because it is it's such a different phase of life, and it's been quite ignored for such a long time, and now it's much more high profile. It was really interesting to kind of write about while I was going through that stage as well, because I had my daughter quite late, so I'm not in her position. Unfortunately, I didn't suffer with it in the way that she did, but there's a lot of people around me who are. So yeah.
I have a bad habit of not writing what I know. And I know that's kind of you're supposed to, the MO is supposed to be write what you know. I always write what I don't know, but there's one particular scene that actually did happen to me that I did put directly into Before You Found Me. I have a terrible, terrible, terrible fear of snakes, terrible. And I share that with Rowan, the main character. And there's one part in the book where she goes into the basement and she sees a snake on the floor and freaks out and takes off, and she's ready to leave the house, and it turns out that it was actually a stick that's kind of shaped like a snake. And that happened to me. I wrote that scene after I had myself gone for a walk one night around my neighborhood, and in the middle of the street there was this stick that was curled on one end and standing straight up, and I lost my mind. And I took off running, and I was so scared that I made a friend of mine come back and drive past with me to look at it and see if it was actually a snake, and it ended up being just really a big stick that looked like a snake. So that was the only time I can think of that I actually inserted my real life into the book, but that really did happen.
I think there are little micro moments from my life in the book, a line of dialogue or something that I always remembered, or the focus of the book is this friendship between three women. And so there are some moments that came from, I have two other women, we've been friends since we were in middle school. And so there are a couple moments that I pulled, but in general, it's more like these tiny little fragments or glimpses rather than, anything big that I'm pulling from my life.
So somebody, Diane asked, did each of you keep your books keep the original titles, or did it shift and change as you moved through the writing process?
And so with mine, I'd had to, and I might talk about this a little bit later if we get onto one of the questions. I'd had to give a synopsis in for this one because it was my second book. And I'd had to give it a title at that point. And it's not the title it's gone out with in the US. But I don't get precious about mine. I'm quite happy if somebody wants to change them further down the line. And both my books have gone out with different titles in the US. What was really nice with the first one, Two Little Girls, was that in the US it went out with what was my original title on it, and we had to change it in the UK because somebody had used something similar at that point, and it went out as Mother in the UK, and that wasn't picked by me. This one actually was called Disappeared in the UK, and Sourcebooks came in with a one-word titles were really popular in the UK at the point it went out, and Sourcebooks, when they looked at it, went, "Oh, do you know, it doesn't fit in the same way in our market." They suggested the title, and I thought it was great, so we kind of went with that. But I quite often pick the title last. Sometimes I don't even have one until the end of the process, and it's very rare that I kind of get particularly attached to them, so they quite often get changed for me.
Yeah, my title is different too. And I remember having my initial meeting with my editor, and she asked me, she goes, "Are you married to the title of this?" And I said, "I'm not even dating the title to this, so you can change it, get rid of it, do whatever you want to do with it." So yeah, I'm dreadful at naming books. I tend to lift things from song lyrics, and I lift things from, I'm a thief that way. But when we had done After We Were Stolen, that had gotten the biggest and the best reaction as far as marketing went. So we went with that. And then when we were talking about, we each of us, my editor and I, came up with a huge long list of just titles that we were thinking about, and she had put forth Before You Found Me, and I was like, well, that's a little bookend, that's nice. Mm-hmm. So when we put that through the research, that was ultimately the one that got chosen. So I was really excited, and I felt kind of personally branded in a way because the titles went together, and in response to that, they kind of made the book covers also go together a little bit. So I really like the continuity there, even though it's different characters, different plot, all of that. I like that it's kind of familiar and recognizable as mine.
Yeah, I want to say Don't Forget the Girl went through 4 titles before that. A couple that I had played with, and my agent and I played with a couple, and then Sourcebooks asked us to send a big list. We did our best. None of them were chosen, and the wonderful people at Sourcebooks came up with the title Don't Forget the Girl. And I just am so grateful to them, because once they emailed that saying, "How would you feel about this?" it felt like the perfect title. But I also am horrible at naming books, and so I'm just really, really glad that they were able to stumble on that for us.
I just want to let Chelsea know, I see your question, but I'm going to save it for later because it's sort of a good wrap-up question. So one of the topics that spans each of your books, and I think all of you have kind of mentioned it so far tonight, is found families or found family. please tell us a little bit about the found family in your books and how they help or maybe hinder the main characters. And do you have found families in your own lives? And what role have those people played in your own life?
I don't have them in my life. This was very much something that I normally write about, blood family, and this was kind of a departure for me, but a really kind of nice one, and it just came out of the idea of two people meeting. So Keris, who is in her 50s, and Lily, who is in very very early 20s, with a child herself, a young child, meet. They are the main two characters of Found Family, but then another one popped up, and Brooke, you were talking about this, one that I didn't expect, just suddenly arrived out of nowhere, should have just been there as a fleeting plot point, and that's Dilys, who is right at the other end of her lifespan, coming towards the end of it, and really gives Keris that mother figure after her own mother's died. And I think what is really nice in Dilys's life is that she hasn't had children herself, and she has that found family experience, and gets that to be that grandparent, with Lily's child as well. So she wasn't planned in any way. She was just supposed to turn up as a passing character, give them somewhere to live, and then disappear off, and only make the occasional appearance. But she absolutely refused to go. And some of the scenes that I really most enjoyed writing were between her and Keris. So there's no way when she made her entrance she was ever leaving. It was I think she brought a whole other spectrum to the book, around Keris's journey, and was really really important and integral in helping her find her way out of that dark pit that she finds herself in at the start of the book.
Yeah, I think in Before You Found Me, the two main characters, Rowan and Gabriel, they kind of have a bit of a trauma bond initially. They are brought together under horrible circumstances, and because of that, they get very tight very quickly. And it initially seems like they're going to be the only found family they have, but kind of unwillingly it expands. And I think that for those characters, the idea of being a found family isn't about loving one another, but it's about letting other people love them. And they both have problems with that initially. They both have problems trusting, and they're very trusting of one another, but they're very compartmentalized in that way. They don't want to venture out. Rowan has a sister who lives nearby. She doesn't want anything to do with her. Gabriel doesn't have any other blood relatives except for his father, who he was taken from, gratefully. But the idea of them just kind of expanding. And I had another character, like you said, Laura, I had a character, Austin, who initially was Rowan's physical therapist, and then he just kind of hung around. And I just kept realizing I'm writing more and more about Austin, and I'm like, I think he's in this family too. So, and it was in a surprising way that really made me happy to include him. But yeah, I think that ultimately they turn into this big kind of messy mixture of found and blood family by the end. So I think it was all about them allowing other people to come in and love them, as opposed to just staying in their own unit.
I love that idea about letting people love you. I think that for Chelsea and Bree, the two friends that have been terribly traumatized by their friend's murder, they're kind of pulled away from each other for various reasons. But part of that, I think, is that letting someone in and really letting someone know you, it's scary to have that mirror held up to you. And so both of them as adults in the present timeline are kind of isolated for different reasons. And they both need and are kind of afraid to, have that intimacy and really let someone in and let someone see them. And so that's kind of part of the journey that they're going on. And then in the past, with the three girls' friendships, I think it's interesting because they all do have parent figures, but when you're 18, there is a bond with your peers that you have that's really different. And there are things that, obviously that you can figure out with them that it's just not quite the same. So that bond is really, really tight, I think, at that age.
So Mother's Day is just around the corner. So if anybody's looking for a gift, Laura's book's out now. So that'd be a great Mother's Day gift. And mothers, as we've been talking about, play an important part in each one of your books as well. So please, I think Laura maybe already touched on this a little bit. So you share a little bit about the roles mothers play in each one, or grandmothers play in each one of your books, and how do the mothers or grandmothers in each of your books challenge or reinforce our cultural ideal of motherhood?
I think in mine, that last point that you had there, that cultural idea of motherhood, that is the overriding issue for Lily, because she doesn't feel like a mother. And what she gets from that relationship with Keris is she's not had a mother herself who's been a good role model. She doesn't know how to do some of the things that we associate with good mothers, but she desperately wants to be one, and that's what she's looking for. She's looking for that person to help her through that. And somebody said, do you always write about mothers? Yes, when I'm writing an adult book, because that's the stuff that interests me. And even now tonight when I've spoken about what's going on, I've talked about my female characters. There's male characters in there that I haven't spoken about very much, because for me, the leading characters, the characters that first come to me, are always women, and it is generally motherhood. And that's what I write about when I'm doing an adult book. The kids stuff, the teenage stuff, that's entirely different. That's a totally different joy. And getting into their heads and writing in character at that age is absolutely lovely. But primarily for me, adult fiction is about the relationships between women. That's just my books, and where I go with that. And I think with these guys in this one, it really was about Keris's sense of purpose when she no longer feels needed as a mother, and Lily's desperate need to learn how to be able to mother in the way that Keris has done without that experience, and those conventional ideas of, well, what are we about when we, if Keris has raised a family all of her life and that's been her main focus and hasn't had a career, what happens when that comes to an end? Who are you then? Juxtaposed with somebody who just doesn't even know how to get into that kind of mindset and be that person that she really would like to be for her kid.
Yeah, I relate very strongly to Keris, because that was one of the reasons I started writing, was because I had just become a mother and I had my daughter, and all of a sudden I felt very mom. That was all I was. I was mom. And I didn't feel like I had, it was a little bit of a rebirth for me personally. I felt kind of younger after I had her than I did even like before I got married. I just felt like rejuvenated. And I thought to myself, like, I just really want something for myself. I want to do something other than be mother. And so in my book, I have a lot of issues with mothers and motherhood and different versions of it. So I have 3 mothers in my book, I would say. Gabriel's mother, Caitlin, who's deceased and we don't see her. Rowan is also Gabriel's mother. And for me, I feel Celia is Rowan's mother, even though she's her sister. She's her elder sister by 12 years, but she has taken on a very motherly role. And she was a bad mother to Rowan, very bad. And she was very, dismissive of her needs, and she abandoned her at very tender moments in her life. So for that, Rowan, in turn, I feel like became a much better mother, because she was kind of operating under what not to do. And I kind of insinuated in a few places that Rowan was kind of speaking with Gabriel's mother, kind of trying to communicate with her and give her a message saying, I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to put him first. I'm going to make sure that he is the number one focus, because she never had that. She grew up in foster care. And when she was taken out, her sister pretty much kept putting her back into it. So she just was continually abandoned, and she doesn't want that for Gabriel. She just wants him to feel secure and protected, and she's going to do whatever she has to do. And then, I can't say that, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but anyway, my 3 mothers definitely kind of piggyback off of each other. And I think all of them in some way are kind of surrogate mothers Rowan is a mother and a child in the book, and she behaves equally in both ways. There's some points that she's very mothering and very mature. In other ways, she's very childish. And as far as conventional motherhood goes, I think the most interesting thing about Rowan and Gabriel's situation is that she's only 10 years older than him. So it's a very short age difference. And I think about that, when they get to be 20 and 30 and 30 and 40, like they're going to be contemporaries before long. But he really did latch onto her as a mother figure. And she, I just thought that was so interesting that they had such a short age difference, but she was able to have that much of a mothering influence over him, even as he got older.
Yeah, Don't Forget the Girl is told in 2 timelines, and in the past, the mother relationship we see is with Abby, who we know from the beginning will die, and so in seeing kind of her final months alive, we see how much her relationship with her mother and the expectations of her mother have really stifled her and kind of are forcing her to create this persona. So in the past timeline, kind of the mother relationship is really one of duty, kind of grudging duty and expectation. And then in the present timeline, Bree has found out that she's pregnant, and it's not the greatest situation because the father is one of her students, and so it's a really fraught situation. And part of the issue is that she didn't have a mother when she was growing up, and trying to see herself and kind of have the self-esteem to believe that she could be someone's mother is a real struggle for her. So in the present timeline, it's kind of about believing that you deserve the things that you want and sort of trying to see yourself as becoming someone who could be a good mother.
So I know Brooke touched on this already a little bit when she's talking about her covers, how they kind of mirror each other, but they're standalone books. So Rebecca and Laura, did you have any say so about the cover? And Laura, was that process different for your work with Sourcebooks versus your UK publisher?
What I found with the covers is that basically I get sent something, I get asked if I like it, but generally that's pretty much it, And I a writing friend from years ago used to work on book covers, and she was kind of like, look, they serve a purpose. That's not your area of expertise. Stay away from it. It's like, do you like them? And actually, I've been really lucky. Both the UK and the US covers for the 2 adult books I've done, I've really loved, and they've had a totally different feel. So they look nothing like each other at all, but they are designed to kind of fill that space on the market for whatever is happening, in your market at that point. So yeah, the markets are different. They do look different, but also the time frame they've gone out in looks different. So that the 2 in the UK look more like kind of children's drawings, cutouts of like paper dolls and things, whereas these have been much more photographic. But I've been really lucky with these. I have liked them all. I have to say, with the kids ones, yeah, it wasn't that much of a positive experience with some of them, and we did ask for one of them to be changed, and I'm still not keen on it now, to be honest, even with the changes they made on it. I still we kind of went, not that one. There was only one of the kids ones where I actually went, yeah, I actually really like that one. The others that were a bit but I've been lucky with the adults, so kind of no complaints from me about that. But it is that somebody who knows what they're doing, a bit like the book titles, the grabbability factor from the shelf, and that's ultimately what you want. You want someone to pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So with mine, they emailed it, and I was just, my Midwestern heart, when I saw the cornfield, I was sold. I was so happy. But it was really interesting to see, just how much thought goes into every aspect of putting a book together. And so I was on an email chain where people were debating how much husk, how much corn, should actually be shown. What would make it obvious that it's a cornfield, but not too much so that it's losing kind of how ominous it looks. And so it was just really, really interesting to see that level of care and detail go into it.
You want it to be a suspense thriller in the corn, not Children of the Corn.
Exactly. There's a right balance of husk is what I learned.
So Chelsea, we'll jump back to Chelsea's question because we're getting near the top of the hour here. So she's asked, is anyone working on any new book projects? And if so, is there anything you're able to share? Brooke, is there a sequel coming to After We Were Stolen?
No sequel. I'm working on something different. And so what I'm working on right now is actually a book about, and this came up before, I don't remember how, but I'm writing a book about a hoarder. And the cat. Yes, the cat.
My cat. Yes, my cat
came from a hoarder house. Yes. So I'm writing a book right now about it's about a young woman who was raised by her grandmother in Wyoming, and when she was 7 years old, her older sister was abducted and disappeared without a trace. She's never found. She's removed from her grandmother's home because after the disappearance of her sister, her grandmother becomes a hoarder and begins hoarding to a degree that the house is not, conducive to having a child in it. So she's taken from the home, she's sent to another family member, and she has no contact with her grandmother for the rest of her adult life. And when she is 27, her grandmother passes away, and she finds out that she inherited her hoarder house. And so she goes back there, and the story turns into, first it starts off that she's intending to clean out the hoarder house to sell it. She's got some financial situations going on that are not great, so she really needs money. So she's cleaning out the house, but in time it becomes a journey about what happened, finding out what happened to her sister.
I've got something that I'm working on at the minute that, do you know what, there's some similarities there, Brooke, with what you're kind of doing on that, just in terms of actually we start off with a murder that's happened years ago, and then it's actually that discovery process that the three characters go through around that. So it's a daughter, a mother, a granddaughter. Unusually for me, the mother-daughter relationships within that both ends are fairly toxic. They've not been, kind of strong relationships. Gone to kind of flip things and explore things the other way. But that murder is what kind of glues the whole of the line of what's going on here, who did what when, etc. And it's the reveal on everybody else's bit of story as you go through. So it's taken me absolutely ages because the plotting and the moving of scenes on it really needs to be quite tight. I'm also working on a kid's book as well. It's something my daughter wanted me to write with ponies in it, because what little girl doesn't want a book with ponies in it? So, but the fact that I'm writing two at once with so much going on at the same time is just making me really slow on both of them. I probably shouldn't have done that, but actually I quite like it, so I'm going with it.
I love hearing the overlap. So I'm also working on a book that has a grandmother, mother, and granddaughter in it. And also there is a dead body, something that happened in the past that they're kind of unraveling. It has started out as kind of a thriller, but now I'm wondering if it's moving more in the horror kind of genre, but because as we've discussed, they don't outline, so I don't quite know yet, but we'll see as it goes on.
So if anybody has any last minute questions, now's the time to drop them in the chat. I've got a few questions left, but we can jump back to audience questions at any time. So one question that I have that I love asking everybody I speak to: what is one thing you wish people would ask you about, and would you like to share that thing with us?
I really want to be asked about the utter pain of writing a synopsis, because do you know what? It's just the worst part of the entire publishing process for me. And very seldom do you get asked about that. But you put writers together all the time, and they all groan together about the same thing. So it is just, particularly for pantsers, and you've not written the book, can you just put together a 2-page synopsis for the publisher? It's just the most painful, soul-destroying thing you can ever ask me to do. And I know I'm going to have to do one when I finish this next book, in order for, because books quite often go out as a 2-book deal. I'm going to have to write another one. I'm just dreading it. So that was my point.
I second that. I hate writing synopses, and they're horrible, and I'm trying to do one now, and I'm failing miserably. But I have kind of a silly one for my answer. I want somebody to ask me about why I have checkerboard brownies in both books. And the reason because of that is because that is something I invented for Before You Found Me. And if you Google checkerboard brownies now, there's a lot of people that are willing to take credit, but it wasn't my idea. A long time ago, when I was writing about the character of Dell and his bakery, I tried to think of something that would be like a cool signature thing for a bakery to have. So I was just like, playing around. I'm like, what could be something interesting? And then it just popped into my head. I'm like, what about a brownie that looked like a checkerboard that had Blondie and Brownie together? And I'm going to make this thing. So I made a batch. It took forever because you have to make huge batches to be able to layer them to get the checkerboard pattern. They were delicious, but just a really pain in the butt to make. But I love them so much that I put them, they have a cameo, and after we were stolen, at the very end, there's a cameo where somebody talks about checkerboard brownies, but they're heavily featured in Before You Found Me. It becomes kind of a plot point almost. And I think what I'm going to do is put the recipe on my website. just so if people would like to go ahead and make these very difficult and time-consuming brownies, they're more than welcome to.
You read my mind. I wondered if the recipe was somewhere.
I would love someone to ask me if the Black Angel in the book is real. So in the book, there is this monument in a cemetery in Iowa City that is called the Black Angel, and it is what it sounds like. It is this dark, it's kind of was bronze that oxidized, so sort of this dark, ominous looking angel statue. And that is real. It's in Iowa City. And in college, people would go there on Halloween. When I was a reporter for the campus newspaper, we had ghost hunters come and use their little equipment around it. And there were all sorts of legends about, what would happen if you kissed someone under it or touched it. And I adore the real story. It looks so ominous because the angel is kind of looking down, but the real story is that a woman who was an immigrant made it as kind of a monument to her son who had died. And because there was kind of a cultural difference in how angels looked, it seemed really scary to a lot of people, but it was really just this monument for grief, which I thought was really beautiful.
And I highly recommend going to see it. It's an absolutely beautiful sculpture in that cemetery in Iowa City. I've been there. Well, we're coming to the top of our hour. We've got some quick fire questions. I am a huge fan of Inside the Actors Studio. So I think, Laura, when I sent you the questions, the very last question on this, I forgot to copy and paste it in. So you can go last if you need to. So we'll just end the interview with some quick fire questions. What is your favorite book?
Am I going to start?
Yeah, go.
Middlesex is my favorite book.
I think it's In the Dream House by Carmen Marie Machado right now.
It's a kid's book. It's The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary Sutcliffe.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would love to be a dermatologist or an esthetician. Yeah, I would be all about that. Ask my daughter. I'm like, really, I'd be all about that.
Musical theater performer.
I would do that one too, Rebecca.
I'm not good enough, but if I were.
Architect.
Ooh. That sounds like a lot of fun, Laura. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Coffee.
Coffee.
Dog, cat, or horse?
I've got all three, but dog. Dog's my thing.
I've got dogs and cats, but I'm going to go with dog.
Dog.
So toilet paper over or under when you put it on the roll?
Over.
Over.
I asked that to an author, one of my first interviews I did, and he didn't know, but his wife was on the chat and she informed him what it was. Whether he thought it should be
that's right.
That tracks.
So books, physical, electronic, or audiobooks?
I do all three, but I prefer physical.
I also prefer physical.
Physical.
Same here. I was at a conference over the week, and I sat in the last night. I was in Des Moines. I sat in the bar because it was sort of an outdoor kind of bar, and I read a physical book and just sat there with dessert and a drink and enjoyed the weather and a nice, great book that's coming out soon. So yeah, get the physical book. So my last question before we say thank you and goodbye for the evening is: if heaven exists, what would you like to hear when you cross over?
What took you so long?
I was always with you.
Oh.
I'd like to hear the sound of dogs barking, because then I know they made it as well.
Oh, I love that, Laura. I've lost so many beloved pets. I'd like to see them all there. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time today and tonight. And we look forward to reading Laura's book, which is out now, Rebecca's book, which comes out next month on the 20th, and Brooke's book that comes out on August 1st. And we have Brooke's book and Laura's book, your first book, Brooke. We have that one in the shop. We have Laura's book in the shop as well. We'll have Rebecca's soon, just a few weeks. So we're excited. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. And we wish you best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.